Even though it's not Srimad Bhagavatam, I think I'll start with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So today we are reading from the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, entitled Jnana Yoga, and it's text number 19. And I see that many of you have books, which is fantastic. Yata Dipo Nibhatasto. Please go ahead. Yata Dipo Nibhatasto.
Yatha Dipo Nivatasto.
Ningate Sopamasmrita.
Ningate Sopamasmrita.
Ningate Sopamasmrita.
Ningate Sopamasmrita.
Yogino Yatachin Chittasya.
Yogino Yati Chittasya.
Yogino Yatachittasya.
Yogino Yata Chittasya.
Yunjato Yogam Atmanaha.
Yunjato Yogamatmana.
Yunjato Yogam Atmanaha.
Yunjato Yogamatmana.
Yatha Dipo Nivatasto.
Yatha Dipo Nivatasto.
Ningate Sopamasmrita.
Ningate Sopamasmrita.
Yogino Yatachittasya.
Yogino Yata Chittasya.
Yunjato Yogam Atmanaha.
Yunjato Yogamatmana.
Yatha Dipo Nivatasto.
Yatha Dipo Nivatasto.
Ningate Sopamasmrita.
Ningate Sopamasmrita.
Yogino Yatachittasya.
Yogino Yata Chittasya.
Yunjato Yogam Atmanaha.
Yunjato Yogamatmana. Yatha Deepo Nivatastho
Yatha Deepo Nivatasto
Nengate Sopamasmruta
Ningate Sopamatmana
Yogino Yata Chittasya
Yogino Yata Chittasya
Yunjato Yogamatmanaha
Yunjato Yogamatmanaha
यथा दीपो निवातस्थो
Yatha Deepo Nivatasto
नेङ्गते सोपमा स्मृता
Ningate Sopamasmrita
योगिनो यतचित्तस्य
Yogino Yata Chittasya
युञ्जतो योगमात्मनः
Yunjato Yogamatmanaha
यथा दीपो निवातस्थो
Yatha Deepo Nivatasto
नेङ्गते सोपमा स्मृता
Ningate Sopamasmrita
योगिनो यतचित्तस्य
Yogino Yata Chittasya
युञ्जतो योगात्मनः
Yunjato Yogamatmanaha Yatha Deepo Nivatasto Ningate Sopamasmrita Yogino Yata Chittasya Yunjato Yogamatmanaha. Anyone else? Yatha Deepo Nivatasto Ningate Sopamasmrita Yogino Yata Chittasya Yunjato Yogamatmanaha. Yatha,
Yatha
as,
as
Deepa,
Deepa
a lamp,
a lamp
Nivatasta,
Nivatastha
in a place without wind,
in a place without wind
Na,
Na
does not,
does not
Ingate,
Ingate
waver,
waver
Sa,
Sa
this, Upama, comparison, Smrita, is considered, Yogina, of the yogi, Yata Chittasya, whose mind is controlled, Yunjata, constantly engaged, Yogam, in meditation, Atmana,
Atmana
on transcendence.
on transcendence.
Translation: as a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self, on the transcendent self. Please repeat: as a lamp in a windless place
As a lamp in a windless place
does not waver,
does not waver,
so the transcendentalist,
so the transcendentalist,
whose mind is controlled,
whose mind is controlled,
remains always steady
remains always steady
in his meditation
in his
on
meditation
the transcendent self.
on the transcendent self.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. A truly Krishna-conscious person, always absorbed in transcendence, is in constant undisturbed meditation on his worshipable Lord, is as steady as a lamp in a windless place. Om Ajnanatamrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitang Tang Sajevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, there's a nice verse in the second chapter. Matra sparshas tu konteya sitoshna sukadukada agama paino nityas tangs tatikshashva bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course of time are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception only, O Shion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So we are living in Kali Yuga, and there is so much disturbance going on. And our lives are very short, and our mind is always thinking of what has happened in the past and what is going to happen in the future. And we very seldom actually ever take the time to sort of realize where we are. And in Krishna consciousness, we understand that, of course, we are not this body. We are actually spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna. So it's interesting here in the verse that the word self is capitalized. And so the Srila Prabhupada, one of the main reasons he came, and very early on in the verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam in his translations, he's constantly smashing the impersonalist understanding of transcendence. And so this verse would be sometimes often used by impersonalists to say, look, you're supposed to meditate on yourself. But no, the context, Sanskrit is very much a contextual language, right? And it depends a lot on what is said before and what is said after, and not just in that particular verse, but even in the verses before and the verses after. So, because Srila Prabhupada is following in disciplic succession, coming directly from Krishna and as the knowledge passed down, so instead of all the other English translations practically, if they ever even wrote self here, they would have it with a small s. And that would then lead people to think, oh, I'm supposed to meditate on myself. But no, we are supposed to meditate on the transcendent self, the Supreme Lord, who is with us within our hearts. That's the form of the Paramatma. I mean, that's one meditation that we can do, is remembering that the Lord is in our heart in the form of Paramatma. But as devotees, we can also meditate on other forms of the Lord, and we know there are so many forms of the Lord. I mean, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the whole Panchatattva appeared 500 years ago, and then there are so many, Lord Nrsingadev's appearance day is coming up in just a few days, and there's the, boar incarnation and the Hayagriva incarnation, the horse incarnation, and just so many different incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And of course, Krishna and Radharani are the pinnacle of the love that is manifest in the spiritual sky. So in Kali Yuga, we are given the blessing by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that we can actually taste the love for Krishna. We can actually have a bit of that taste because we are only small parts and parcels. We can't have the full taste of the love of Radha and Krishna, but we can definitely have a taste and be absorbed in the pastimes, and not just absorbed, talking mentally, but actually be absorbed in the pastimes and actually make it back home, back to Godhead, and be in those pastimes, simply by chanting the holy names of the Lord. It is such a blessing in this Kali Yuga that we have this ability to attain the spiritual sky and to attain our full realization of ourselves as spirit souls and as not these bodies by simply chanting the holy names of the Lord. And so we should try to take advantage of it as much as we possibly can. And so we chant japa, we chant kirtan, we listen to kirtans at home, and we try to absorb ourselves always in meditating upon the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because that meditation is actually non-different than being there. It's interesting that Lord Chaitanya, it's actually often talked about that he was in Vipralambha. And Vipralambha means that separation from Krishna. And yet, when we chant Hare Krishna, we often tell people that Krishna and Radharani, the Supreme Lord, is actually dancing on our tongue. Right? So there's that separation, that feeling of separation, which is a very exalted. In fact, Srila Prabhupada explains that in the material world, when a loving couple get together, they join in union and they're enjoying each other's company and they're very happy. But as soon as they separate, if one has to go and work in another place or something and they're separated for some time, then they're meditating on the other person. But because they're not with the other person, they're feeling very dejected and depressed and very much in anxiety about it. And it's not a good feeling. And especially if somebody passes away, you have some loved one who passes away. It's a very horrible feeling that you've lost that, loved one. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually showed us how you can have that separation, but actually be in the highest ecstasy of union with Krishna, not union in becoming one with Krishna, but in being there with Krishna. So simply by chanting that holy name and by remembrance of Krishna in that way, that he's not with us. Like, he's here, obviously. Everything comes from Krishna, all these pillars and this roof and the whole planet and the universe, it all comes from Krishna. But we're thinking that Krishna is not here, right? And we can't see Krishna. And so we're sometimes often in that state of, if we're devotees, we're thinking, I can't see Krishna, please. I just want to see Krishna. But the taste actually comes first through the tongue. And we have to be able to chant very purely in order to invite the Lord into our heart. It's by that sort of constant association with the holy name that we begin to get purified, because Krishna will never come to an impure place. He'll only come to a place that's, in fact, it's said that Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. So we have to make our hearts Vrindavan-like. And what happens in Vrindavan? Everyone is constantly chanting, right? Everybody is just constantly chanting and thinking, what can I do for Krishna? How can I go with Krishna? What can I do for Krishna? How can I help Krishna? And Mother Jasoda, she does everything for Krishna. She even puts all these little amulets on, to protect Krishna from demons that might be in the forest and from spirits and things like that, because she's thinking, I have to protect my little Krishna. And the cowherd boys are all, and then he goes off to be with the cowherd boys, and Mother Jasoda is left at home. But what's she thinking? She immediately absorbs herself in thoughts of, I've got to clean up everything so that when Krishna comes back, it's very nice, and I can just keep serving Krishna, and then I'll make sure that I have everything cooked and ready so that I can give him dinner when he gets home, and then be able to have everything ready so that I can give him more prasad to take with him in the morning, like that. So she's just constantly meditating on Krishna. And everybody in Vrindavan, in the spiritual world, they're all thinking like that. Just how can I serve Krishna at every second of every single day? So this verse is actually saying that somebody who, a transcendentalist whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in meditation on the transcendent self. So we know, and some of you may have been to japa retreats, and one of the main things about chanting japa is you're chanting and you're thinking about Krishna, and you may be having a vision of either you're looking at a deity or in the mind you're thinking of the deity, like that. But then all of a sudden, a few mantras go by and you go, whoa, my mind just went elsewhere. I was thinking of icebergs off of Newfoundland or something, what I mean? It's just like, you never know, the mind just goes anywhere and everywhere. But we just have to bring it back under the control of the self. And so somebody who is a true transcendentalist, who has actually attained that transcendental platform, never allows the mind to get out of control like that. And how does that happen? It is really by developing that ruchi, the taste for the holy name. There's a nice song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Kabe Habe Bolo Se Dinamar. When, oh when will that day be mine? And he wrote the I think it's in Bengali, but he also wrote the translation in English as well. So when, oh when will that day be mine, when all my offenses ceasing, taste for the name increasing, when, oh when will your mercy shine, when, oh when will that day be mine? So even though Bhaktivinoda Thakur was obviously in our parampara and had Srila Bhaktisiddhanta as a child, obviously a very great personality, but he's praying like that to show how we should be praying. That we should be thinking that it is by the mercy of the Lord that we get the taste. So how do we get the mercy? It's simply by chanting more and more. The Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction talks about how we are in a jaundiced condition right now. We are in a diseased condition. And I remember I had jaundice once when I was about 10 years old. And I used to like a certain type of sweet. And I can remember after a few days of not having this sweet, I asked my mother, can I have this sweet? And she's going, well, sure, I can get it for you. And she gave me it, and I was like, it tasted horrible. When you're in a jaundiced state, anything sweet, like sugar candy, it just, tastes terrible. It tastes like poison. And yet, the sugar candy is actually the medicine. And it brings us back to our real state of having the right taste, right? So right now, we may be thinking we have to chant our rounds, or we have to chant Hare Krishna, we have to remember Krishna. But as one chants more and more, then the taste develops more and more, so that we eventually come to the point where all we want to do is chant japa, and all we want to do is think of Krishna and do everything for Krishna and work for Krishna and play for Krishna and think about Krishna, and everything is for Krishna. And that is the undiseased state of mind. So it is really done by just taking the medicine of the holy name, which right now, if we really had I can say that if we really had a taste for the holy name, we wouldn't even want to eat or sleep, because we'd just be so absorbed in just chanting. And practically, Srila Prabhupada didn't eat or sleep. He ate very little. He only slept maybe 2.5, 3 hours a day, and sometimes not even that. And he never seemed to be bothered, even if he was traveling and he had to miss the time when he was sleeping. And he showed up at a temple and he would just get right into the program and wouldn't even feel affected. I can guarantee you, if I had stayed up all night and arrived here today without sleeping, I would not be able to speak to you very well. But Srila Prabhupada was in that transcendental state. And the amazing thing is he told us that we can also be in that transcendental state. It's not an exclusive club. I mean, it is exclusive, but in the sense that it's open as well. It's open for membership to anybody. The only price is that we really chant and we want to get there. The lolyam, the eagerness that we want. I just want to get the taste of the holy name. I don't want anything else. I just want the holy name. Nothing else will do. And then we can get into that club of being fixed with the taste of the holy name, fixed in the constant meditation on Krishna, who is the true self, the capitalized self. And then it becomes easy to control the mind as well, because then we're not attracted. You know, there's nothing in the material world that can pull our mind away from Krishna. Now, somebody may think, well, what about if you have to go to work? I mean, actually, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, we know he was a magistrate, and obviously he had to do things, right decisions, legal decisions, and things like that, and take care of a lot of different business. But his motivation behind all of that was simply to serve Krishna. And that is really, if we have that motivation, so when we wake up in the morning, it's a very practical thing. You just wake up in the morning and you go, okay, before you think about what you're going to do for yourself, just think, okay, first thing, everything that I do today, I'm going to do for Krishna. Just have that as your first thought in the morning. And then you've basically offered everything. Now, that means that when you go down the stairs and you end up in the bathroom, you're brushing, I'm doing this for Krishna. You're showering, I'm doing this for Krishna. And I'm taking prasad, I'm doing this for Krishna. I'm driving off to work, I'm doing this for Krishna. I'm going to work, I'm doing this for Krishna. I'm talking to my boss, I'm doing this for Krishna. You know, anything that you do during the day, if you make that as an offering to Krishna, then your day becomes completely transcendental, and you're constantly in remembrance of Krishna. So you'll always be happy, right? Instead of being, bogged down by all the drudgeries of the material world, you'll see that, wow, I'm doing it for Krishna. Like Arjuna. I mean, when you think about Arjuna on the battlefield, what did he have to do? He had to shoot arrows through people. I mean, any of us who even think about killing even an ant, practically, we go, I don't want to go there. But it was Arjuna's duty on the battlefield to go and shoot arrows through people. But he knew he was doing it for Krishna. And so it made it completely transcendental. There was no karma involved, because it was all done as an offering to the Supreme Lord. And as Krishna says, Sarvadharman prityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tong sarvabhapebhyo mokshayashyami masucha. Just abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction, do not fear. So anybody else on the battlefield, if they're thinking of themselves, then they're not going to get a transcendental result. They're going to get the material result of killing others. But if they're on the battlefield thinking that I have to do this because Krishna asked me to do this, then it becomes a transcendental activity. So Krishna is nowhere, we can't have anybody who's sort of a little loose in the head, perhaps, going around saying, well, Krishna told me I got to kill people, so I'm going to go kill people. It's not like that. I mean, it's just like there are some religions nowadays where they are killing people, thinking that this is what they're supposed to do. It's a holy jihad, and it's not. That's not the way. We have to try to help people to understand their position as eternal spirit souls. First, we have to help ourselves as much as possible, but then by helping others also, we are helping ourselves as well. And so, if we can have some books with us when we go to work, or even have a little, I don't know if you have a little card that says that you have this meeting every Sunday. I don't know if you have a little mantra card with the Maha Mantra maybe on one side, and then an invitation on the other to come to the Sunday feast.
Not yet.
Huh?
Not yet. We are just in process of.
You're just in the process of making. Great. And you have one of those with you, and you invite people. Please come and take part in our celebration, and hear more about how to find out who we really are. Most people in the material world nowadays, even though they get bogged down in the mundane things, almost if you ask anybody, who are you really? And they'd say, well, I'm so-and-so, my name is Chris Sahosky, prior to taking initiation. And so if they just answer, I'm Chris Sahosky, well, are you really Chris Sahosky? Because you've only been Chris Sahosky for the last, 60, almost 70 years. And you're only going to be Chris Sahosky for maybe, if you're lucky, another 10 or 15 years. And so, is that who you really are? I mean, do you understand that, or do you just feel that consciousness is a combination of matter? And a lot of people will say, yeah, I just believe consciousness is a combination of matter. But it can be shown, and I'm sure many of you, and if you want, later, if you want to talk to me about it, there's many arguments as to how you can tell people that consciousness cannot arrive from something that is unconscious. So, even though nowadays they have these chat bots, and everything, the chat GPT, the artificial intelligence, and it may even seem like it's got a brain, and it's amazing that the way it can pick up everything from the internet and even write poetry and sing songs and write letters and do everything, but it's not conscious of what it's doing. And so therefore consciousness it is something that is above and beyond. It's an awareness of what is happening on the mundane level. It's not just doing the mundane things. It's an awareness of what is actually taking place. And that awareness is not there. And so if people hopefully start to realize, and there are many people, because even surveys nowadays show that there are probably about 90 to 95% of most people believe in God. So if they believe in God, they believe in the eternality of the soul. And so immediately you can start to tell them that, because I was brought up Roman Catholic, and as Roman Catholics, everybody thinks that their soul began at birth. That was the beginning of their existence. But it's very easy, if they do have even that minuscule understanding, it's very easy to let them know, well, eternity doesn't mean the eternal passing of time. Eternity means the absence of time. And I was even talking to a Christian the other day, and he got that right away. And he realized that, he had a past before this life, and he'll have a future. And then I said, and so self-realization actually means understanding who we are in relation to the Supreme Spirit in that relationship of service. And he said, yes, that's right. So that's, we're not trying to convert people when we get them to come to the temple. This is not a conversion. Prabhupada said it is not an artificial imposition on the mind. Any religion is an artificial imposition on the mind, because you can change religions, but you can't change Jivara Swarup Hoy Krishnara Nityadas. The soul oops, sorry, is the eternal servant of Krishna. It's not going to spell. It may just dampen things a little bit. Anyway, everybody is an eternal servant of Krishna. And because they are at least maybe a little pious and they understand that there's a relationship with God, then we can help them to just understand that relationship. Prabhupada said, we want people to come to the point of being the best servant of God that they can be. And it doesn't matter whether that manifests through the Christianity or Judaism or Muslim faith, it doesn't matter. We're not trying to make people Hindus or anything like that. We are just trying to help everybody understand that they are spirit souls and they have an eternal relationship with God. And it may manifest in different ways. And this is just one of the wonderful ways. I mean, you know, when you're in a really ecstatic kirtan, chanting the holy name and you're with devotees, you can feel that ecstasy of Krishna consciousness. And offering everything, you know, as being brought up as a Christian, I never thought that, even though Jesus offered everything at the Last Supper, I never thought I have to offer everything that I'm cooking. I never thought like that. But when I became a devotee, now nothing goes past the mouth without it. Is it offered? You know? So it's a complete change of consciousness, and it just becomes, you know, are you the best servant of God that you can be? And I think that's where Krishna consciousness, that's our role in society, is to help people become the very best servants of God that they can be. Not that they have to join anything or change anything, just become the best servant of God that you can be. And it begins by glorifying the holy name. And even, you know, Muhammad said that was the way, you know, Allahu Akbar, and, you know, glorify the name of Allah. And Jesus said, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, you know. So, and whether it's Jehovah, Allah, Adonis, whatever, you know, Prabhupada said, just glorify the name, just chant the holy names. But the Hare Krishna mantra is simple, it's easy, it's a direct address to the highest understanding of God, and it just helps. Just come and chant, and you'll see the natural ecstasy of your relationship with God will become open. And I think that's how we need to approach people. It's just, you know, I'm not here to change your religion. I'm just helping you to get to the ecstatic point of serving God as purely as possible in whatever religion you're in. And so people will understand that. And that's why so many people understood Srila Prabhupada, because he was sincerely trying to just help others. It wasn't a matter of trying to change others. It was just helping others, helping them to be the best devotees that they can be. And that compassion, that desire for others' welfare. You know, we say, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripasindhibhyevacha, Patitanam Bhavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who are just like desire trees, fulfilling the desires of everyone, because they are full of compassion for the fallen, conditioned soul. So Prabhupada was full of compassion. And everybody noticed it right away. Anybody who came in contact with Prabhupada, oh, he's a nice man. You know, they felt that compassion. Even if they didn't become devotees, they still felt wonderful person. I probably met one of the most wonderful persons I've ever met in my entire life. And so we need to all, as followers of Srila Prabhupada, try to have that same compassion, try to help others to become Krishna conscious. And I was mentioning earlier that if we get even one Western person who comes through the door, I think it would be like on a Sunday, instead of, or at least if you are going to sing Guru Puja, have the words up with the translation. Yeah. And if you're going to sing, you know, the Gora Artik, make sure you have the words and the translation. so that they can follow along. But really, the best thing is probably to change the program a little. And this may sound like, what? We're going to change the program, but we've always been doing this. But just chant Hare Krishna. You know, if you get a couple or a couple of kids even, 16, 17-year-old kids come in and they want to know what this is about, just change it. Just, hey, let's just sit down and chant for a while, and you guys can join us and sing along. It's just a sing-along, and they can pick up on the words quickly. And that's how you help people. It's not that, there's too much involved in learning the words and everything else. No, it's just chant. And then have some wonderful prasadam, and they're on their way. So even, don't be afraid to change the program a little bit if it's, or a lot, if it's going to help somebody become Krishna conscious. In fact, we know that, I just not long ago took the deity worship course with Nishaya Kavacha. Well, it was actually prior to COVID, just prior to COVID. The understanding is that if the pujari is in the temple room looking after even doing the artik, and in the temple in Toronto, sometimes that happens in the afternoon. It doesn't happen so much anymore. The temple's becoming a busy place with the dining room and everything. But it used to happen a lot that somebody's doing the artik, and somebody will walk into the temple room, and because there was nobody sitting at the front desk, they walk right into the temple room with their shoes on. Now, the reaction shouldn't be, oh, get out of you can't have your shoes on. No. It's like, welcome. It's so nice to see you. I'm really glad that you came. And the pujari should put down the incense or the lamp or whatever he's doing and go and meet that person. Because that is so much more important than worshiping the deity. You worship the deity in that person by going to that person and saying, thank you for coming. And is there anything you want to know? Can I get you some food? Maybe we can sit down, we can talk a little philosophy or chant Hare Krishna like that. That's the most important thing, is helping that person become a devotee of Krishna. Krishna already has a lamp. He gets thousands, millions of lamps every day. What's another lamp? But a devotee? Somebody who has left his association in the spiritual world and ended up in the material world for so many years, and then they've made that beginning of walking into a temple. We have to fan that spark. Prabhupada always fanned the spark. He made sure that anybody who he came in contact with, he encouraged them. So that's the way we need to be, is always encouraging. Don't be chastising. Prabhupada practically never chastised, and he only chastised if he really knew that the person that he was chastising could handle the chastisement. And obviously somebody who comes in and doesn't know that they're not supposed to wear their shoes would not be able to understand why you're suddenly yelling at them. And yet, I can tell you that this has happened in Canadian temples as recently as, just a few months ago. Which is, I can't believe it, but somebody didn't get the message. So I'm just here to deliver that message, but also that, as this verse is talking about, chant, remember Krishna, do everything for Krishna, constantly think of Krishna. We will eventually be able to come to that state of pure meditation on Krishna no matter what it is that we're doing. And we will be in that all-auspicious state of serving Krishna and serving everyone else at the same time. And that is where Prabhupada was at, and as Srila Prabhupada's representatives, we all should aim for that goal, that I want to become a pure devotee of Krishna so that I can help people the way Srila Prabhupada helped people. I guess I'll stop there. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments? I think I might have gone a little overtime, right?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I just had a question. In the early days, because I'm reading Prabhupada Lilamrita, Did Prabhupada have like a picture of just like Panchatattva at like the early centers in New York? And
Well, I mean, when Srila Prabhupada came, he didn't have pictures, right? Um, I'm not even sure. I have one of the old Bhagavatams at home. I'll have to look it up and just see if there was even a picture of Panchatattva of like, it would have been in black and white. But there might be, I have one of the ones that came in a trunk. I don't think they came in the original trunk with Srila Prabhupada, but there were some that were shipped about a year later. And so I have one of those Bhagavatams. But Srila Prabhupada, once Jadharani joined, after that, then Srila Prabhupada started describing to her how to paint a picture of the Panchatattva, and then the Panchatattva became manifest. We know all the different stories on how Krishna revealed himself to either Prabhupada or the devotees. We know that story of Malati, being in the store in San Francisco, and there were three big buckets of these little forms, and she picked up, I think, Subhadra, just the yellow-faced one, and it was about this big. It was almost like it would be on a keychain or something. And she brought it to Prabhupada and said, "Prabhupada, have you ever seen something like this?" And Prabhupada immediately offered obeisances, and she was like, "Whoa, I don't know what I found, but I found something really important." And then Prabhupada immediately got up and he said, "Were there others?" "Oh yeah, one with a white face, one. This is Subhadra, and the white one is Balaram, her older brother, and the black one is Krishna." And it's like, so, and then Lord Jagannath appeared to, Srila Prabhupada appeared in the West in that way. Obviously somebody had been to India and just thought these neat little dolls, you can buy them for, like they would have been paisa in those days, like maybe 5 paisa each or something. And then they brought them to America and they were selling them for $1 a piece, which back in those days was a big chunk of cash, in India. So it was, all of a sudden they were trying to make money, but that's how Lord Jagannath came to the West. So, yeah, I think it was a gradual manifestation of different paintings and different understandings like that. Yeah. Yes.
Prabhu, what was your first encounter through your own transformation journey? You mentioned you are a practicing Catholic or born Catholic.
Oh yeah.
Would you have time to share that with?
It is a fairly long story. I'll try to abbreviate it as much as possible and maybe talk really fast. I first just got kind of interested in yoga and transcendence. There was just something burning in me that I needed to know who I am, where I've come from, what am I doing here? Why is there suffering? Why is there happiness? And how can I always be happy and not be suffering like that? And then I remember walking into a store one time in Victoria. I was visiting out there, and it was 1973. It was the summer of 1973. And or spring of 73, and I saw the Maha Mantra on the wall, and I'd seen Hare Krishna devotees from a distance and chanting like that. In fact, the first time I saw a kirtan party was 1971 at McGill in Montreal. I was a first-year McGill student, and the chanting party, I came out of one of the buildings and I walked by the chanting party and I went, crazy, and didn't think much more about it. But it was after that I really, this desire to really know who I am and everything else really became manifested. It somehow sort of lit the fire that, I've got to figure out, and yet I didn't connect the two at all at that time. So then I read the Maha Mantra. The very next day, I was going back from Victoria to Vancouver, and I went to get on the ferry, and I was sitting in a park waiting for the ferry, and I met this devotee who, at that time, it was pretty much you were either in the temple as a shaved up devotee and wearing Dodi and Kirta all the time, or you were out of the temple and you were blooped. There was no sort of half and half. There was no grihastas or anything like that. So, but this one guy sat down beside me and said, what are you doing here? And I just said, I'm waiting to go. And he said, oh yeah, so am I. And then there was a bumblebee flying around in the park, and he said, you see that bumblebee? He got that body from desires from a previous lifetime. And I went, what did you just say? And he goes, yeah, he had a previous life and he had desires. He was sitting here just like you, and somehow or other he wanted to taste the flowers, nectar, and he ended up getting that body. And I was like, what? And so then he started explaining to me all about karma and reincarnation and everything else, and it just, and we spoke all the way back over on the ferry, and then he brought me to his place. And it was pretty amazing. He kind of lived in a hippie house with a whole lot of hippies, and we walked up and it was dirty and everything. But then as we got up to the third floor, there was another staircase up to a room that had a big padlock on it. We went up there and he opened up the padlock, and it was like walking into a temple. It was all painted sort of pastel blue and pink, which in a lot of the old temples, pastel blues and pinks and yellows like that. And he just kept telling me, and he showed me Prabhupada's books, and I can remember reading some of the third canto. It was only up to third canto part 1 in those days, and I remember he showed me the third canto part 1, and I was reading it, and I didn't really understand it, of course, because but I just remember thinking, there's a lot here. And anyway, we ended up parting, going different ways. He didn't sell me a book or anything, which is, books were not as available as they are these days. But he definitely instilled in me, it was like, from then on, I kind of felt my journey is going to take me to being a Hare Krishna. I just kind of felt that. And I remember he was walking one way and I was walking the other way, and I turned to him and I said, what's your name? And he goes, no, it doesn't matter. And I go, yes, it does. You changed my life. And he goes, my name is John Fogarty. So then I went back to school in the fall at the university. There was a devotee named Balakrishna, not the Balakrishna in Edmonton, but Balakrishna who lives in Sharnagati right now. And he was meeting me in the university, and I immediately ran up to him and started asking him questions and things. And I just, was hearing and chanting because I was taking a philosophy course and a philosophy of religion course, a philosophy course. And so both of those teachers were always asking me things, and I would ask them things. But then when I started hearing from Balakrishna, I started telling the teachers about that, and then they had more questions, and so then I'd go ask Balakrishna, get the answers, so it was a real hearing and chanting thing going on. And I just became totally convinced, and on April the 9th, 1974, I moved in. I still had 3 exams to write, and I did write those exams, but that was it. That was it for my university. I was done, and and that's how, basically, I've just been a devotee ever since. And yeah, and what's interesting is 33 years later, 29 years later, I guess, in 2003, I was at a Canadian leaders meeting, and we were in Vancouver. And it was the last Sunday, and Bhakti Marg Swami asked all temple presidents to get up and to say what they'd been doing during the year. And at that time, I was on the spiritual strategic planning team. And that was run by Gopal Bhatta Prabhu. It was a very good program, thinking about a lot of different things. And so Maharaj asked me to get up and and he gave everybody like 3 minutes to talk. And I'd been sitting back, sort of looking around the audience, and I hadn't been in Vancouver in a long, long time. And I saw this one face in the audience, and he looked a little familiar, but couldn't be. And then I ended up standing up and going, you know, being in Vancouver is like a homecoming for me because I first heard about Krishna on a ferry between Nanaimo and Vancouver.
Yeah.
And this guy in the audience went, his eyes just went, and everybody in the audience is going, what's going on? You know? And I said, you know, 1 minute. And so then I finished my 2 minutes or 3 minute spiel on the SPT. And then I walked over to him and I went, John? And he goes, Chris. And then we were hugging each other. And he was saying, I was praying you'd become a good devotee. And I was hugging him and I was saying, I'm still praying I'll become a good devotee. And it was just amazing. Like 30 years later, just like that. And I haven't seen him since. In fact, I've heard that he had a little difficulty with drugs and things like that. So he had a hard time staying in the temple even back in those days when he first met me in 1973. And he still had difficulties. And eventually, I believe some devotees said that he took his own life. Yeah, so very unfortunate. But he definitely was like my Vartma Pradarshika guru in some ways, because he really helped me put me on the path towards Krishna for sure.
So, Prabhu, how and when did you meet Srila Prabhupada, and how was that feeling like when you first saw him?
I can remember it was in New Vrindavan in 1974. Prabhupada, we had stayed not at the main, New Vrindavan was completely different than it is now. It was just halfway to where the main temple is now. I don't know, how many people have been to New Vrindavan? But you know, as you're going down the road, halfway to the main temple, there was a small white house, and that used to be the temple. It got torn down for some reason. Somebody wasn't thinking anyway. I think they're apparently planning on building it up again. But we stayed, even from there, we stayed at a house off in the field. It's called Old Vrindavan. And it's this place where Radhanath Swami and Chandramali Swami and a whole lot of brahmacharis used to have an ashram. And it was about probably a 2-kilometer walk, you know, through the fields and forest. And so we had stayed there. So we were just coming down in the morning, and we got to the road just in front of where the temple used to be. And Prabhupada was on a morning walk, and there was a little rise in the road like this. So we were on one side, and Prabhupada and all the devotees were walking here, and we were walking here, and then, you know, suddenly their heads started to appear over, and we saw all these devotees like Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Paramahansa Swami and a few others, and we were thinking, well, Prabhupada must be with them, and then we saw Prabhupada. And I had only seen pictures of Prabhupada, and just the way Prabhupada spoke with such force and such conviction, I thought Prabhupada was going to be small. I mean, big. The other way around. Yeah, I thought he was going to be this very strong, powerful personality, but when he actually came, he was a head below everybody else. But you could see that Srila Prabhupada was he was in a class by himself. I mean, how many people have their consciousness completely fixed with Krishna in the spiritual sky, but are walking on this planet? Not very many, right? And Prabhupada was such a personality. And he was so, many devotees. In fact, I'm sure if you've ever seen the memories, and even if you go to YouTube and you type in memories of Srila Prabhupada, you'll see Siddhanta Prabhu has recorded many devotees talking about Srila Prabhupada, and almost every single devotee says, when Prabhupada looked at me, I could tell that he was looking right at my soul. And some devotees even, it was almost a little bit of an uncomfortable feeling because nobody had ever looked at them like that, seeing right through to the soul. It was like completely different than anything they'd ever felt before. And so, yeah, Prabhupada was very, very special. And, you know, I think one of the things that I've been talking about lately, and I'll just quickly touch on this, but it's an important point, is that we have gurus in ISKCON. And we have a disciple course, and in the disciple course it is mentioned that, you know, there have been gurus in ISKCON who have fallen down and fallen away, right? And so it talks about there how to prepare one's consciousness. It's not inevitable that your guru is going to fall down, but there's a possibility that your guru might fall down. How to prepare yourself for that possibility? And is that possibility, even thinking about that possibility, is that offensive? Not necessarily. Because somebody can be a guru and not be an Uttama Adhikari. Uttama Adhikari and pure devotee are not synonymous. Even though sometimes in the books and in conversation they are synonymous, but they actually can be two very distinct things. An Uttama Adhikari is somebody who is practicing Krishna consciousness, but actually has the full realization of seeing Krishna face to face and being on the transcendental platform with Krishna. So the curtain of Maya has been lifted and Krishna is right there. A pure devotee is somebody who may have even just walked in off the street practically, and yet they heard a class, they decided that I'm just going to wash dishes. Can I stay at the temple? I mean, in the old days, that's what happened. People they'd come in, they'd hear a class, they'd start washing the dishes, they'd wake up the next morning, they'd put on a dhoti with everybody else, and 2 days later, they'd have their head shaved, and 5 or 6 months later, they were getting initiated. And somebody who stays on that platform of I just want to do everything for Krishna, they may not be seeing Krishna face to face, and they may not be talking with Krishna. As Prabhupada actually was speaking with Krishna and even said that to somebody who asked that question, do you speak with God? And Prabhupada said yes. And then one of the devotees tried to explain, well, Prabhupada gets these, it's not as if Prabhupada was speaking, and when Prabhupada heard the devotee trying to explain that to somebody, Prabhupada just said, no! I am speaking with Krishna just as I am speaking with you right now, at every second. It's a completely different state of realization, right? So the devotees who have accepted, and practically speaking, I mean, the GBC have encouraged every Prabhupada disciple to be guru and to take up the process of initiation, because there are thousands of people coming to Krishna consciousness, and we only have really like 100 maybe gurus. 80, yeah, not very many active initiating gurus, for thousands of people coming, and it's a big burden to have a lot of disciples, because a lot of people asking you questions, trying to get directions, on how to go back home, back to Godhead. So it's a difficult thing. It should be really a more close thing, that I'm here for you, I'm day-to-day working with you, functioning in Krishna consciousness like that. At least, just it's a little more simple and direct, rather than, putting the guru on a big pedestal and you only see him, once every couple of years when he sort of flies through your town. I mean, that is one way of having a guru, but, guru really means one who is giving you instruction in your Krishna consciousness. So if you can have a local guru and have somebody, and Bhakti Marg Swami says this all the time, we just need more local gurus. People who are ready and willing to accept a few disciples, and everybody should, rather than having mega gurus, we should have, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but we should have more people who just have a very simple, direct relationship with a guru who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and can help them advance in Krishna consciousness. Anyway, I should probably stop there, right? I've gone way over time now. But, the process of Krishna consciousness is actually very easy. And Prabhupada said that many times. Chanting, dancing, and taking prasadam. And we tend to complicate it often, and it can be complicated, but generally speaking, it is our mind that is complicating it. And there were disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta, godbrothers of Srila Prabhupada. There was one, Krsnadas Babaji. I met Krsnadas Babaji very briefly in Vrindavan in 1976. And he was not on the same level as Bhakti Vedanta. Prabhupada knew the Vedas, backwards and forwards, inside and out. He could quote anything from anywhere practically. It was like he knew the whole Bhagavatam by heart. He knew the whole Gita by heart. I mean, I don't know if he did know it by heart, but it seemed like that because Prabhupada could pull out a verse anytime, anywhere, and just, it would be the perfect verse. And so many verses from so many different Upanishads and Puranas and different things like that. Prabhupada was Bhakti Vedanta. I mean, he had the complete knowledge of the Vedas with regards to bhakti. And Krsnadas Babaji was a very simple devotee living in Vrindavan, and all he did was chant Hare Krishna. He practically never really, preached heavily to people, didn't quote a lot of verses or anything. Let's chant. Practically whenever he came into your presence, it was just, let's chant. And so it can be very simple, but Srila Prabhupada knew that a lot of complicated minds are going to come to Krishna consciousness. And people, because the material world is so complicated, people, in order to get out of that and to understand the simplicity of Krishna consciousness, you actually have to kind of go through all the complexities of Krishna consciousness to get to the essence of its simplicity, which sounds almost contradictory, but you got to go through the complexities to get to the simpleness. Because in the spiritual sky, like the cowherd boys and the gopis and everybody in their relationship with Krishna, they're just simple cowherd people. They don't, they're not reciting the Bhagavatam all the time or anything like that. They're just serving Krishna. And they don't see even Krishna as God. It's just, he's my friend. He's my best friend. And we can think like that. We should be trying to think like that. Krishna is my very best friend. He's always with me. He's always giving me everything I need. Even if your life is flashing before your eyes because you're in a car accident and suddenly you're going to die, Krishna's still taking care of you because he's going to if you're remembering him, he's taking you back to Godhead, right? So we don't have to worry about anything. There's nothing to worry about. Ma suchaha, nothing to fear, no fear. And that's one of the qualities of a sannyasi that even, Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita. Fearless. We have to be completely fearless because we know Krishna is always there. I mean, Prahlad Maharaj, of course, we're going to hear a lot about that story on Thursday because of Lord Nrsingadev's appearance day, but Prahlad Maharaj was that kind of a person, devotee, that he was just constantly thinking of Krishna and serving Krishna and doing everything for Krishna. So, when his father tried to kill him, he couldn't do it. His father couldn't kill him. He tried in so many ways. He tried to knife him to death and have the guys spear him to death and couldn't do it. He had, tried to get an elephant to step on him and crush him, and the elephant wouldn't step on him. And he tried to throw him off a cliff, and he Krishna caught him and saved him. And he tried to poison him, and because Prahlad Maharaj offered all his food to Krishna, he didn't get poisoned. Right? So in this way, Krishna was just protecting him from everything. But we know that, hey, we're in material bodies. We may not be as pure as Prahlad Maharaj. So we're going to have an end to this body. But if we're constantly thinking of Krishna, even that end becomes completely auspicious. Even if it's a car accident or cancer or whatever, don't worry about it. It's like it's going to happen, right? We know that we're going to die. That's actually probably the most basic instruction of Bhagavad Gita. We're all going to die, but we are all actually eternal. And that death is something that we just have to live through. And if you understand that you are that spirit soul, then you will live through death. But if you're thinking you're that material body, then you'll give up that identity and start all over again. So it is like a complete death. But if you understand your spirit soul, there's no death.
So, as you mentioned just now, right, that the ideal state is that you should be able to get some instructions from the guru, right? The way you explained.
Right.
So, what's the, like, how do we find the guru? Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really important to, actually, the Hari Bhakti Vilas describes that somebody who's coming to Krishna consciousness needs to find out what are the qualities of an advanced devotee in Krishna consciousness, or somebody that they feel that they can take shelter of. So you find out those qualities of a good devotee and you think, does this person have those qualities? You know, and we know from even in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a whole list of, in the, it's the 15th chapter, the whole list of the divine qualities, divine and demoniac qualities. It's the 15th chapter that starts off. My brain is just, anyway, you know, there's a whole list of the wonderful qualities of the devotees. So you find somebody that has those qualities, and then, or not, and maybe not even in full, but you know that they're trying. They are constantly trying to live up to those qualities. Then you go, I can take shelter of this person. And that's, you know, and it describes in the Hari Bhakti Vilas that the guru and the disciple should examine each other for at least 1 year. So if your guru is far away, it's a little hard to examine, right? I mean, and in ISKCON, basically we've been taking the word of, I mean, and that's what it was like when Srila Prabhupada was here. We took, and obviously we were reading Prabhupada's books and we understood Prabhupada and qualities and his knowledge and everything else, and we felt that he was the one, who else is there, you know, to surrender to. But once he sort of passed from our mundane vision, we now need somebody to initiate us into the parampara. So we should find somebody who's just trying to live those qualities as best they can, and who is on the path back home, back to Godhead, because then they can help us on the path. Now they may not, it's described that, you know, somebody cannot give something that they don't have. So if they don't have Krishna, they may not be able to give you Krishna. But if they can give you a relationship with Srila Prabhupada, because Srila Prabhupada didn't just disappear. You know, he reasons ill who think that Vaishnavas die when thou art living still and sound, right? So Prabhupada is definitely still alive. In fact, he's more available today for everyone than he was when, I mean, there were no videos of Prabhupada. The only thing we would get was once every week or two, we would get a little cassette, 90-minute cassette tape. And on one side was a Bhagavatam class and then a bit of a morning walk. And then on the other side was a Gita class and a bit of an evening discussion. And that was it, like once every 2 weeks. And that was, you know, the closest practically that we got to Srila Prabhupada. I never sat with Srila Prabhupada and engaged in a conversation with Prabhupada. Never. Some devotees were lucky and fortunate and they had that. But I almost feel that I was fortunate enough that I in that kind of a situation, I might have just been a fool and made some terrible offense, and I might not be sitting here before you today because of that offense. And instead, I just, you know, tried to serve. But the devotees, you know, many devotees with Prabhupada have just stayed, like Hari Sari and Shruti Kirti Prabhus, who stayed with Prabhupada all the time, because Prabhupada was on an intense schedule, right? And these devotees had to live, even though they had come from, you know, mlecha backgrounds, and all of a sudden they had to live this intense schedule with Srila Prabhupada. Just like, practically speaking, when Prabhupada is awake, Hari Sari and Shruti Kirti Prabhus, at different times, of course. They were Prabhupada's personal servant. They had to be at his beck and call. As soon as the bell rang, they had to be there. So Prabhupada was pretty merciful to his servants, so he hardly ever rang in the middle of the night. Like when he would wake up to translate, he would just wake up and translate. But they still had to be ready for if that bell rang, they had to get up and do whatever it was that Prabhupada wanted. And so it was very intense. And somehow or other they survived that ordeal, by fire. I don't think I could have. I honestly don't think I could have. I mean, it was austere enough for me to be, back in January, having a few beers with the guys when I was going to university, and then in April, I'm suddenly sleeping on the floor of the Hare Krishna temple, and getting up at 3:30 in the morning, and then going to Mangal Arti, and it was just like, it was that enough was austere. So it was a different time. But to answer your question, just try to find somebody who's trying to serve Krishna and you think can help you to serve Krishna, and then you can take initiation from them. The GBC has encouraged every Prabhupada disciple should try to take to some disciples. Lighten the load a little bit. And just think, I'm lucky if I have 15 to 20 years left. So eventually maybe I'll initiate somebody, maybe I won't, who knows? But in the future, I'll be gone. And those disciples will then also be expected to take disciples, and it's only 15, 20 years. I mean, I know that 15 to 20 years into my Krishna consciousness, I was not at all ready to accept disciples. I don't think I'm even really qualified to accept disciples now, although I have some people telling me, oh, you should be taking disciples, but who knows? I haven't had anybody approach me, and I'm really, it's not looking forward to that day because it's a huge responsibility. It's not something that you can just, oh, I've got somebody who wants me as a guru, yay. No, it's not like that. It's like, I am now becoming responsible for this person's spiritual life. Huge responsibility, not something to be taken lightly. And yet we'll all be in the boat where we have to take that responsibility someday. Men and women. I mean, I know there's been a thing, but Prabhupada definitely said that women can be gurus in ISKCON. And he said it right in Toronto. And I know there is some controversy about that, but I know there's letters where Prabhupada said, I want all my boys and girls, all my disciples, boys and girls, to have the title. And because Prabhupada was talking about the different Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Sarvabhauma, and Bhakti Vedanta. I want them all to attain the title of Bhakti Vedanta, and I want them all to be gurus, to accept disciples. He says that right in a letter in 1975. And then in a conversation in Toronto with Professor O'Connell, some people say, oh, well, Prabhupada was just talking to a professor, so he gave the socially acceptable answer of saying that women can be gurus. No, Prabhupada didn't do that at all. Prabhupada never, adjusted the truth. Prabhupada always spoke the truth. And because Professor O'Connell wasn't just a professor, he did his PhD on Gaudiya Vaishnavism. He knew a lot about Gaudiya Vaishnava history. So immediately, Srila Prabhupada, when he was asked that question, can there be female gurus in your movement? And Srila Prabhupada's response was, yes, we have already had. And he said, Jahnavi, the wife of Nityananda, she's already been she was initiating people into Krishna consciousness. She was already guru. And then Prabhupada goes on in the conversation and he says, anyone, he or she, who knows the science of Krishna can be guru. And so they say, some people say, well, Prabhupada was talking about Diksha Guru, not Shiksha Guru. No, because the first thing he talked about was Jhanavi, who was initiating Guru. So Prabhupada knew he was talking about initiating Guru. He wasn't talking about Diksha Guru. And yet, there are some devotees who are kind of towing the line that, women can't be gurus. No, it's like if you know the science of Krishna, you can be guru. I mean, look at Saraswati, right? I mean, she's the goddess of learning. She knows everything, practically. And is she not guru? Give me a break. And then some people say, oh, well, they can only be guru if they're on the same level as Saraswati or Jhanavi. It's like, come on. Are you serious? Are you on the same level as Saraswati and Jhanavi? No. So you can't be guru either. If that's the standard that we're going for. So it's just ridiculous arguments. Yeah. And the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita is you're not that body, you're spirit soul. You have nothing to do. And Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Devotion says, Sarvabhadi vinirmuktam tatpratena nirmalam, that Rishikena sevanam bhakti ruchite, that just abandon all material designations and engage in the service of Rishikesh. Engage all your senses, Rishikesh, in the Rishikesham, in the service of the controller of the senses. So, whether you're a man or a woman, that's just a material designation. So, Rupa Goswami says, just forget all those material designations. I mean, we still have a men's and a women's bathroom, and we still, because we know that in material consciousness, men and women are like, fire and butter. It says the women are like fire and the men are like butter. And you put them together and the men melt. They just... So it's really important that we get rid of that designation and just function. Being a guru is a spiritual function. It has nothing to do with being a material function. It doesn't fall into the varnashram system or anything like that. It's completely transcendental. And so it really has nothing to do with being male or female. And I honestly think that, in India, there are many devotees coming to ISKCON now. And most temples are still only really having brahmacharis. And the women are still kind of living on the outside. And, but the brahmacharis, Prabhupada described that 90% of the brahmacharis are going to end up getting married, right? So shouldn't their future wives already be engaged in devotional service, right? So having a brahmacharini ashram in a temple is, Prabhupada's developed that, and he wanted to see that. And it's not, some weird concoction. And that's the way there are some very conservative devotees in ISKCON, in India, who are saying, oh no, you can't have women in the temple. But yeah, you can. Prabhupada did it. And this is ISKCON. It's not Hinduism. It's not, Varnashram is one part of it, but becoming a devotee is actually, and we know Lord Chaitanya talking to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he even tells him, Varnashram is, lower principle. What is higher? And that whole conversation. So, anyway, wow, I've really gone over time now. I'm so sorry. I think we should probably wrap it up. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.